The congressional resolution urges equity in legal marijuana markets and pushes Biden to advocate for global cannabis reform at the UN, you guys, the United Nations. The Democratic co-chairs of the Congressional Cannabis Caucus have reintroduced a resolution calling for state and local decriminalization of marijuana and encouraging the adoption of specific best practices around regulated markets. The Respect resolution was introduced by Representative Barbara Lee and Earl Blumenauer on Thursday, along with 6 other co-sponsors, all Democrats, to encourage states and local governments to enact a number of reforms around marijuana designed to address disparities in participation in legal marketplaces. The legislation calls for removing criminal penalties from marijuana use and possession, ensuring public benefits cannot be denied to someone due to a cannabis conviction, and eliminating suspicion-less drug testing for non-safety sensitive employment positions. The legislation encourages local licensing and eliminates broad felony restrictions, prohibits previous cannabis convictions as jurisdictions for denial of a license, and determines criminal convictions on a case-by-case basis for both owners and employees. The Drug Policy Alliance NORML, the better organizing to win legalization, better known as BOLPAC, and the Minority Cannabis Business Association endorsed the Respect resolution and its reintroduction. The legislation encourages the use of tax revenue from marijuana sales to support people of color entering the legal cannabis industry, and BOLPAC founder Justin Schreckel, formerly the executive director for NORML, said marijuana policy alone cannot undo the totality of the harms of the systemic racism, but it must include reparative justice provisions. NORML's political director Morgan Fox emphasized that legalization's goal is broader than merely ending prohibition of the plant. He said that the organization is looking for ways to invest in and remedy the harms visited on individual cannabis consumers. Lee and Blumenauer first introduced the Respect resolution back in June of 2018, and Lee has been a voice for marijuana equity in Congress. As more states have legalized marijuana, critics have warned against regulations that allow large businesses to dominate the market and ignore the needs of communities harmed by prohibition. Blumenauer announced in October that he won't seek a re-election this year, but he said he still has hope that the Biden administration will heed the will of the voters and end cannabis criminalization. The Drug Enforcement Administration told Congress that it reserves the right to make any scheduling decision on marijuana regardless of what the Department of Health and Human Services recommends, and there have been frustrations over delayed U.S. Senate consideration of a bipartisan bill to safeguard bans that work with state legal marijuana businesses, but Blumenauer remains hopeful for a productive year in federal marijuana reform. Well. This is Jason Beck for the High at 9 News. I can't wait to hear what all you guys have to think. I think this is just, I like that the drum that he's beating, but I don't think that it has any teeth, and I don't think it's actually going to do anything at all. But nonetheless, let's hear what you guys have to say. This is Jason Beck for the High at 9 News. What do y'all think? You guys are all on mute. No thoughts on this, huh?
I love that they're talking about it.
Yeah, I think it's great too. Yeah, I think it's great that they're talking about it.
I'm with you. I don't think it's gonna happen.
They're not gonna do nothing. They're not gonna move Biden to do anything. I mean, they're not gonna offer him like a big old.
To quote Shakespeare, much ado about nothing.
Much to do about. Look at that, Dr. Mark.
Much ado about nothing.
I feel you.
Right?
Yeah, they're not going to do anything about this.
It's just your classic lip service. It's an election year. It's interesting. That the whole Biden's thing about pardoning. What was it? Just possession use, right, Jason?
Yep.
So, it really doesn't address the reform that really needs to happen around enforcement, and certainly the 900-pound gorilla in the room is they just, because they couldn't get the committee together, they kicked the can down the road on the farm bill. So the hemp derived thing is still basically at odds with the regulated cannabis industry. And, there's lawsuits that are claiming that there's revenue to regulated cannabis businesses that are being drained by this hemp-derived thing, which is a completely unregulated territory. So all this other stuff around safe banking and rescheduling is all bullshit because they're not addressing the main problem in the industry today.
Mm-hmm. It's very true. The main problem is the fact that cannabis.
Do you agree? Does anyone else?
No, I'm 100% with you. I agree with you, but I don't think that we're going to get to a point of descheduling at this point. I think safe banking is probably the closest thing that we are going to get. And rescheduling, I fear that it's going to have dire consequences for the industry. So I don't see like a big win here.
I think here's where I would disagree, which is I think that Biden has done an excellent job grandstanding, pandering, and optics mongering. And I would not say the same thing about Barbara Lee. Barbara Lee is my favorite politician, and I know that that is a contradictory statement, but that woman has been at the forefront of everything important. And when it comes to the regulated cannabis industry, she has been a champion and an ally in a way that very few policymakers can actually claim. And so when I see her name associated with something, I go, oh, watch out, something might actually get done. The other thing is, and I say this time and time again, but I have to be on brand and on message. Anytime we talk about cannabis taxes funding worthy causes, we've got the equation wrong. We've got the equation wrong. Because I will tell you one thing. You show me your budget and I'll show you your priorities. And if your priority is to siphon money from the industry as a way to support worthy causes in or outside of the industry, you've got a broken model.
Oh, similar to what Gavin Newsom's story yesterday, huh? It's very similar. Very, very similar. I agree. I agree with all you said. I agree with everything you said, Yarrow, for the most part. Yeah. I don't. You have any thoughts on this?
For the most part, but I think Colorado. Yeah, I was going to say I think Colorado would disagree because they just invested how many millions of dollars into their schools from their successful cannabis taxes, right? So I get the argument on that side, but I think the conversation that should be had is cannabis needs to be descheduled and treated exactly the same as hemp in the Farm Bill, and they need to not have these two different schedules. And that's the conversation everyone should be having, because they're just creating more mess for themselves, even in more loopholes, if they continue to keep it separate like this. And of course, we can all feel bad for our cannabis industry comrades and colleagues whose businesses are going under while people sell Delta-8 and THCO across the nation. But then those people's responses, well, no one's stopping those farmers from doing the same thing. So it's this very capitalistic mindset, right, of survival of the fittest. And I think that's not fair when we're all playing by these different rules. But again, the government doesn't really care about us. They care about them, right? Yep,
exactly. And Dr. T on this, a lot of people, they say that, one of the reasons that you have a lot of these international trials and whatnot is they say because the UN still has cannabis listed as a dangerous drug or whatnot on their controlled substance list. Do you think, Dr. Talleyrand, that really, anyone really cares what the UN says in regards to their drug policy? Because after all, if America deschedules cannabis, you already know the UN is just going to follow suit after that.
That's right. And, to initially have cannabis, as something prohibited, it clearly shows that the UN is following some other directive other than science. They're not really following the evidence of science. And so, this is a political game. It's not what the people want. 70% supporting, at least medical use of cannabis, and science showing that it's not harmful. What is the holdup? It's all politics. What can we do?
The UN's primary underwriter is the United States. I think it was like 70% of their budget or something. Is. I don't know the exact number, but the truth is people pander to who covers their bills. And so while the UN has this impression of impartiality and of having all of these representative nations, it's going to be lockstep with whoever pays 70% of their bills.
Yep. I agree with that.